am, again, so excited to do yet another Security Super Friends. And with me today, I have Randy Barr. And Randy's going to tell you all about himself. He's going to, in particular, talk about what it means to scale in high velocity environments like Zoom. But before we do that, Randy, everyone wants to know, who's your favorite superhero and why?
I guess my favorite superhero would be Batman. One, because he's rich. I guess the other part is that he's built so many different tools to be able to address some of the challenges that he has faced with. And so with the right knowledge and the right effort, you can pretty much solve any problems with the right tools.
Okay, great. That's awesome. You went DC. You know, everyone has
Yeah,
been
I did.
everyone's been defaulting to Marvel. I actually think Batman is a great characterization for security, right? He works out, right? But he's rich and he's super smart and he has to be really, really resourceful. And I think in many ways that does resemble the world you and I've lived in as CISOs. So Randy, you've had a super interesting career. You've, a lot of CISO work, across great companies, across, you were at Zoom, now you're working in the healthcare domain, right? So pretty expansive. So it would be great to hear about your progress to world domination, where you came from and how you got to where you are, just so the people listening can understand, who you are and where you come from.
Sure. I started my career out when I was actually in high school. My uncle owned a business and he asked me to help him set up his network. So I helped my uncle set it up. And it was back in thicknet cabling days. As soon as you get one vampire tap wrong, then the whole entire network goes out. So I was doing that and soldering motherboards and started getting bored of that and said, you know what, this is probably not going to be for me. I'm going to go into the military. So I went to the Marines and thinking that I was going to be in military police. When I left the military, I brought myself back into a different field in HR, and they recognized how good I was with technology. Taught everybody Excel, Word at the time. This is back in Windows for Workgroup, not even connected together. Back in Novell days, if some of you remember those. Eventually, I became an IT person, managed an IT department, moved over to Sega.com up in the city, and then I found out about this small startup company back in San Jose called WebEx. So I went over there, joined that team, and it wasn't until one day that they experienced an outage and they required somebody to go and investigate. Well, we found out that there was a problem with a vulnerability on the Windows device. We remediated that, and then eventually, make a long story short, they needed a security person to focus on that program over there. Managed a couple of teams and then decided to just focus on security at WebEx. Was there from pre-IPO to acquisition by Cisco. And then from there, decided to move to other fields. I wanted to experience different verticals. Went in the financial sector, went into the learning management sectors, went into a vendor, was the CISO for Qualys for a while. And then eventually made my way over to Zoom as their product security, then their security operations. And then I decided that I want to get back into being a CISO again. And so left Zoom and went to a company called Interven. And I'm their CISO over there.
That's a great career. So you and I share a stint at the Q at Qualys. I was there 2002 to 2004, so pretty early days. But it was a great company and still is a great company. And you've had, an interesting career. You and I, our time spans, we're early. And, again, a lot of it was, necessity being the mother of invention that drew us into the field. So you've received recognition, for being involved in SaaS and infrastructure security, right? Again, Qualys was a SaaS company. Obviously, Zoom, just, massive exposure, fast moving technologies. How have you made sure that security keeps up or stays ahead of these trends? And in particular, I would say, with the advent of like what you probably saw at Zoom, where you're talking a volumetric scale, how has security been able to keep up? Again, we're so outnumbered and outgunned, particularly when you add CI/CD in there, cloud native velocity. it's really hard to keep up. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about some of the things that you've seen and what you've done to be able to keep pace.
Well, there's a lot of community, or the security community is pretty strong out there. And if you work closely with the security community, there's an opportunity to learn more about what other people are doing. And that's something that I've recognized early on from local chapters, participating in the Cloud Security Alliance, working for companies that embrace working with other security professionals, setting up security council meetings, working directly with folks that has been in the industry for some time as security leaders, presenting some of the things that you need to look at, how do you address it, what you're thinking of doing, and getting feedback from them. It also helps to get different security leaders from different verticals to participate in some of these conversations as well. Qualys, we did Qualys did that early on. They pulled in a lot of security members, or pulled together a security council and talked about, the different approach that they're taking when it comes to security. Leveraging that relationship to understand what some of the challenges that they're faced with, and how it, I don't want to use the word compliments, but how it mirrors some of the challenges that you're having too. But yeah, there's a large team of bad actors out there, and working in a siloed environment doesn't make sense for security professionals, as you're probably aware. We need to work together and understand what skill set other people have that might benefit you. And there's a lot of security people that are willing to help.
I think that's a great point. I think participating in community is so important. Listen, we just don't know everything. In fact, the nature of our job oftentimes is dealing with what was an unknown unknown, right? Some bad guy, some bad actor, some malware, a vulnerability that maybe existed for even years and now is disclosed. So now it's a knowable unknown. And so having to being able to leverage a community and to learn from people, I think, is just key to the nature of the uncertainties that we face. So I think that was a great point. So thinking about, again, dealing with unknown unknowns and getting again to the more of the velocity sort of thing, and talking about your experience at Zoom, and including even experience during the pandemic, how did you manage what was a high velocity software development, cloud native oriented environment, right, heavily distributed? How did you keep up with the speed of development? Meaning, how did you operationalize security in a way that was non-disruptive yet still effective, given lots of software development, again, continuous integration, continuous deployment? Tell us a little bit about what you did there.
Sure. So I can't speak to directly what we or all the details at Zoom. What I can share is some of the experience that I learned over the years, and that is that there's certain environments where you put in where you have time to build out your security program. And when you build out your security program, the idea there is to apply the right tools at the right time, and make sure that you have the right resources. But when you grow as a company, and as fast as some of my experience has been, you need to make sure that you have a strong collaboration with other team members. You can't survive in a fast growth environment unless you have the executive team or large team members that are working alongside of you. In some of the experiences that I have in that type of environment include individuals that are willing to say, look, Randy, I don't want you to have to worry about an agreement. Let me handle that. If you need to bring in a vendor, go ahead and evaluate that vendor. If you also need help, here's some procurement people that can ask the right questions. Let's remove the stuff that you don't need to worry about from a security point of, from a non-security point of view, and hand it off to somebody else. So there was a strong team dynamic that I've experienced in a couple of other companies that is very crucial to making sure that you're growing the organization right alongside, or growing the team right alongside the organization. There's a lot of things that you have to look out for. One, are there tools that exist today that can scale to the size that you're growing into? Two, are there policies, or are the policies that you have, is it something that you need to revisit now, or is it something you need to revisit later? It really depends on the regulatory compliance you have to adhere to. What are some of the commitments that you already have for some of your customers? Some of the compliance requirements that your customer, that you've agreed to, and whether or not that's a strong or that will continue to grow along with the company. The other part is as you grow your team, there's also the culture within that team that you need to maintain. I've experienced certain growth in other companies where team members thought that losing some of the responsibility, handing off to a new team meant that they're no longer needed, which is not true. Communication, transparency, letting them know that they're needed and letting them know, trust me, there's plenty of work for us to do. Here's some examples, but also giving them the bigger picture of when you think the next phase is going to be, not where the company is eventually going to be, because that could be a little far out. You still need a team to grow into that. But what are the iterations that you're going to have to look at? For example, we're going to have to hand off certain functions over to the IT team, have them responsible for the security at the endpoints, and let them handle that. What we'll do is shift the responsibility of policy enforcement, policy reviews on our end, and making sure that we also have audit capabilities to ensure that that's in place. We no longer need to manage those endpoints. Let IT handle that. So the team experience that I had is looking and dissecting each of these programs in a way that allows other teams to take that responsibility on so that you can be better focused on what you need to do. The one thing that I've also would highlight is if you grow as fast as some of the companies I've been at, the other thing that you need to watch out for is duplication of projects. As you grow fast, there's other team members that are looking at, oh, I need to do the same thing. Let me give you an example. The endpoint. I'll use that as an example. If you're going to be deploying security at the endpoint or at the desktop and laptops area, when you already have team members that are having that responsibility to initially deploy, select, and maintain that, you might have another team that's growing that may think that they need to also do the same thing and hire for that. Communication between teams is going to be very important. Having an agreement on the responsibilities and the projects is also going to be very important. Having a tool to manage that project is crucial. And also access to those project tools is going to be very important. When I was going through the experience that I was going through, one of the things that I would do every time I would wake up is go through our project tool and look through the list of what I'm doing. Trying to see if I have the right people that have access to that information and whether or not they're up to date. For some, when I'm working on projects, if I think that they're going to be working on it as well, then I set up weekly meetings with them. Transparency and communication, I can't say I can't say that enough. It's very crucial. The other part, another example is how do we embed security very early on? And that's when we need to identify who are the stakeholders, who are the people, who are the users of that service, and how do we ensure that we get in front of this to make sure that we have the right process in place to be able to address any security potential gaps that might come up.
That makes a lot of sense. Again, I hear a theme that's a great theme for, again, for aspiring leaders to hear is that, you know, the role is very communications heavy. I think it was Microsoft that said SD3, then they added it, they made it SD3 plus C, so secure by design, secure by default, secure by deploy. And then they realized, oh my gosh, there's a C, which is communications. And in fact, it's perhaps most dominant now. You started leaning into, at the end there, a conversation about, I'll interpret it as shifting left. I'll call it shifting left. And what do I mean by that? That we have to find a way to enable, in this case, I'll say development, DevOps, that's right, enable development to have some responsibility for security, because we're a small team. It's one security engineer to 100 developers, right? And oftentimes it's even a worse ratio than that. And so we have to find a way to allow these teams who are moving really fast, doing hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of deployments a day, enabling them to be able to do security. Can you talk about how you've done that, be it at Zoom or otherwise? Again, how you've shifted left, meaning instead of security saying, okay, here's my team that doesn't know what you're doing in development, doesn't understand your infrastructure. I'm going to come in with tools that may or may not apply, and I'm going to figure it out. Not doing that, that doesn't work anymore. You and I know that. Shifting responsibility and enabling. Can you talk a bit about how you've done that, be it at Zoom or otherwise?
Yeah, so the developers are, they're focused on development work, and that's their primary responsibility. Some of them have some security experience, but they're focused on delivering what the product team would need for them to deliver on. And so one of the things that I've seen work well is making sure that we involve them in the security side of the house. There are tools today that allow for some training of those developers, actually share code and show them, here's where some of the vulnerabilities you may want to look in these lines of code to be able to identify where the vulnerabilities at, and then work through that training that allows for them at the end to do some testing to say, could you go ahead and find this vulnerability? And there's different types of modules available to developers to be able to go through that. So if you introduce that piece of it, training is going to be important. Another part that I've adopted way early on in my security career is when I did assisted source code review for other companies. One of the things that I did was leverage that pen testing firm to build out a training module. The closer you can get to the code, allows for a developer to understand why certain things exist. Also, putting the pen testers, the individuals that found that code, to be able to have that conversation with the developers also is very important. Developers will only focus on certain areas. They have some security experience, but allow them the ability to ask the right questions so that they can learn from it is another important step. Shifting left is very important. We've got to be able to make sure that we identify some of those vulnerabilities early on as possible. And some of those include implementing tools. And those tools would allow for any static, dynamic code analysis. But more importantly, when you start releasing or having major release, should you start involving either third party or your offensive security team, depending on how big your organization is, to get involved in that, to be able to have access to that source code, to be able to do some of those tests quickly. The automated tools can only look for certain things at, for only a certain amount of things. Getting talented individuals to be able to think creatively will be able to find some of the other items that most other bad actors would find once you release it out to the public. Having a process in place, making sure that you have enough information that gives the developers an idea of what it is that you found is also important. So training those folks is important. You can add a bunch of tools and automate those tools, which is also very important too. But I think the connection back to developers is key.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So tell us a little bit about your new role. You're at Interven. Tell us about that. That's a shift, obviously very different from Zoom. And what are some of your goals there?
Yeah, so I'm going to be implementing a security program and also managing the IT program over there. And it's a little over a month now. And we are reassessing the security program and establishing a baseline of what that security program looks like. So imagine working on the ground up and identifying opportunities to improve on that as we continue to grow the organization. I also, from experience, one of the things that I'm thinking about are what are the tools that exist today and how does it scale to, 5x or 10x? And if it only scales up to 5x, what is my plan for after that? So I'm also building a little backup plan just from lessons learned over the several years. So I'm making sure that I stay on top of that. The other part is, so that's security side. And the other part on the IT side is, do we have the right solutions in place? Are they all integrated? Are we making the right decision for the company and what we want to do? And then going back again to scaling, how do we scale quickly without interruption of the service? Because the work that we're doing is very important.
That makes a lot of sense. Again, I'd say lessons learned, going back to your idea of having, a consortium of leaders you can talk to. I'm going to say this from experience, a lot of the lessons we've learned are lessons that came through tough trials, right? It's in security, you can make a right decision it happens with us a lot of times. You can make a right decision and still have a bad outcome. You can invest in the right people, process, technology, and still, the sword of Damocles, I talk about this often, still drops, right? And having a community out there which you can learn from, then to help you do things like you just suggested. Like, you have a plan, but you also have this, this backup you're talking about. I think that's an interesting area to explore, something we could perhaps talk about more. So my last questions here. So what do you think people should know about key trends in security, including cloud native development, enabling product development? So what are some of the trends you're seeing? What are the things that you think are, maybe being overlooked that shouldn't be? Just some of your futurist or near futurist thoughts on security.
I think the biggest one that everybody's also looking at right now, I'm really focused on this at this moment, is the users and where they're connecting from, how they're connecting to work. The individuals are the ones that I continue to think that are the opportunity to improve on security, not just training, but also finding ways for them to make their lives a little bit easier. We have individuals that work from home. We have no visibility into the network. We don't know what else is connecting on that same network. We're seeing targeted attacks to individuals. It's something that we've been talking about for many, many years. But now that we are working more towards not just a remote, now shifting more towards a hybrid environment, whatever is happening at home, they can essentially bring that over to the office when they do come in. Users using other people's laptops within their home network, the list goes on and on. So I think that looking at technology that helps introduce additional controls for those type of users at home, but also looking for different types of training, and maybe even shifting the approach of training, not necessarily focus on work-related training, but how could some of that actually impact their own personal life? If you start getting closer to how it impacts them personally, I think they're going to start thinking about security a little bit more. And I'm sure this is a conversation that a lot of my friends and I have had, and that's kind of the conversation that we've had around awareness training and awareness, just general security awareness.
Right. Well, this has been great, Randy. You've been super generous. And again, if I were to summarize some of the takeaways here, is you really have to surround yourself with a community. And I know that we hear this a lot. I think security leaders hear this a lot, but I think you need to be strategic and thoughtful about that. Because again, we're just not going to know everything. We're never going to know everything. Again, we're going to have hundreds of swords of Damocles that are ready to drop at any point in time. And we have a complex set of requirements, not just dealing with cloud native development and software and velocity. We have remote people, right, who are connecting, as you said, from who knows where, right? They're not just remote. They're probably increasingly, now that we're maybe emerging from COVID a bit, they're going to be migratory as well globally. And so how do we, think about those two worlds where we have third-party SaaS-based development, when we have our users, and how do we secure that? And that's going to require us to be talking to a lot of people and getting feedback. I really love your idea of having a backup plan. It's like, you have a strategy, you're at a new company, you're going to build out a security program, yet you're already thinking about, what are the contingencies, and you're doing that early on in your first few weeks. So I think that's great feedback for others. But Randy, I really appreciate your time. You've been, again, super generous, and we look forward to continuing to watch your ascent to world domination.
Great, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Great.